Aarav Mehta thought he was chasing the American dream. Victoria Lane turned it into a deadly nightmare. In 2019, Aarav Mehta stepped off the plane at Los Angeles International Airport with a suitcase full of dreams and very little money in his pocket. At 23, he believed he was on the path to a better life. Back home in Mumbai, his family had sacrificed everything to send him abroad. He enrolled in a small private college for a tech program, hoping it would lead to a high-paying job and eventually a green card. The excitement of being in the United States quickly faded when reality hit him. Life in Los Angeles was expensive. Rent consumed most of his savings, and the odd part-time jobs he managed to find barely covered groceries. Days were long and nights were lonely. Aarav often spent hours walking through glamorous neighborhoods, staring at the mansions in Beverly Hills and wondering if he would ever belong to a world like that. He worked at a small cafe near Rodeo Drive, where the wealthy and famous often came for their morning coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but the tips were good enough to keep him afloat. Every day, he watched people step out of luxury cars, dressed in designer clothes, carrying an air of confidence he envied. Despite the struggle, Aarav kept telling himself that things would get better. He had big dreams and believed hard work would pay off. But deep inside, anxiety gnawed at him. His student visa had an expiration date, and time was running out faster than he imagined. If he couldn't secure a job soon, he would have to return to India, a thought that terrified him. He didn't know that his life was about to take a turn he never expected, a turn that would lead him into a world of wealth, secrets, and deadly deception. One chilly evening, the cafe was almost empty when Aarav noticed a woman sitting alone at the corner table. She looked out of place, dressed in an elegant black dress with diamonds glinting on her wrist. Her usual entourage was nowhere in sight, and without the presence of bodyguards, she seemed almost ordinary. Aarav recognized her immediately. Victoria Lane, a name often whispered by regular customers, known for her extravagant lifestyle and high-profile charity events. Tonight, however, she didn't look like the glamorous socialite people admired on magazine covers. Her face appeared tired, her eyes carrying a heaviness he couldn't ignore. Aarav hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach her with a simple act of kindness. He brought her a cup of coffee and quietly said it was on the house. She looked up, surprised, and for the first time, he saw a small, genuine smile on her lips. That tiny moment changed everything. From that night onward, Victoria began visiting more often. Always alone, always sitting in the same corner, ordering the same drink. Aarav found himself curious about her life, though he tried to hide it. Over time, their conversations grew longer, moving beyond small talk. She spoke about her love for art, her passion for travel, and hints of loneliness slipped through her words. Aarav learned that her husband, Daniel Lane, was a real estate tycoon who spent most of his time traveling. People assumed their marriage was perfect, but the way Victoria spoke told another story. She began leaving $100 tips casually, as if money meant nothing to her. Whispers among other staff suggested she was drawn to Aarav. He didn't believe it at first, but the way her eyes lingered on him made it impossible to ignore. Something unusual was beginning. By the start of 2020, their connection had grown stronger. Victoria invited Aarav to her mansion in the Hollywood Hills under the pretext of showing him her art collection. The house was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. For someone who had been living in a cramped apartment, it felt like stepping into another world. The invitation turned into another, and soon Aarav was spending most weekends there. What started as innocent visits slowly transformed into something more intimate. The two began an affair that neither of them could walk away from. Aarav was captivated by Victoria's charm and the luxurious life she introduced him to. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, exclusive parties. He was living a fantasy he had never imagined for himself. But with all the glamour came something else. Victoria was generous, showering him with gifts, but there was an underlying sense of control in everything she did. She liked to know where he was at all times, and she became distant whenever he mentioned school or friends. Aarav didn't think much of it in the beginning. To him, this was a dream come true. As weeks turned into months, he started to see cracks in the perfect image. Victoria's moods were unpredictable. At times, she was affectionate and warm. Other times, she was cold and dismissive, disappearing for days without explanation. Aarav also realized how isolated he had become. His world now revolved around her and her demands. Meanwhile, he discovered more about her personal life. Daniel, her husband, was rarely home. There were rumors of his infidelity, but Victoria never spoke openly about it. Instead, she hinted that he didn't care about her anymore, making Aarav feel like her only source of comfort. What he didn't know was that this affair was about to pull him into something much darker. One evening, Aarav was on a call with a friend, nervously discussing his visa situation. His student status would expire in a few months, and without a job offer, he would have no choice but to leave the United States. He didn't notice Victoria listening from the doorway. The next morning, she brought it up casually, her tone calm, but her words startling. She said she could solve his problem. Aarav didn't understand at first, but then she made her offer clear: marry her, and she would make sure everything was taken care of. The idea shocked him. Victoria was still legally married to Daniel. When Aarav hesitated, she assured him that Daniel didn't need to know. She spoke with confidence, claiming she could handle everything, from the paperwork to the people involved. She even mentioned that Daniel had his own secrets and was too distracted to notice anything. Aarav tried to reason with himself, telling himself it was only a temporary arrangement. He saw it as a chance to secure his future, to avoid going back to India empty-handed after everything his family had sacrificed. Victoria sweetened the deal with promises of financial security. She would cover all expenses, even set up a bank account in his name. Aarav's desperation overshadowed his doubts, and he finally agreed. What he didn't realize was how complicated the plan would become. It wasn't just about signing papers. There would need to be proof of a real relationship, fake divorce documents, and cooperation from people who didn't always play by the law. Immigration lawyers were brought in, but not the kind Aarav had expected. They were shady, asking for large sums of money in cash. Aarav believed Victoria had it all under control, but this plan was not about love or kindness. It was the start of something dangerous. The plan quickly became more complicated than Aarav expected. Victoria insisted he move into her mansion permanently to make the relationship look authentic. She claimed immigration officers might check for proof that they lived together, so Aarav packed his things and left his small apartment behind. At first, the move felt exciting, but soon, reality sank in. He had no job anymore, no income of his own, and every expense, from clothes to food, was now controlled by Victoria. It didn't take long for the pressure to build. Victoria became demanding, questioning his every move. If he wanted to meet friends, she discouraged him. If he spent too much time on his phone, she grew suspicious. Her charm was fading, replaced by a cold, possessive streak. Meanwhile, the paperwork dragged on. There were endless delays, extra payments, and mysterious legal complications. Aarav began to wonder if the marriage would ever be approved. Then came the threats. Aarav started receiving anonymous text messages warning him to stay away from Victoria. At first, he thought it was Daniel, her husband, who had somehow discovered their relationship. But when Aarav mentioned the texts, Victoria brushed it off and told him not to worry. Still, something didn't feel right. He noticed strange visitors coming to the mansion late at night, and Victoria would disappear into locked rooms for hours. Whenever he asked, she dismissed his questions with vague answers. The glamour that had once dazzled Aarav now felt suffocating. He realized he was trapped in a life he didn't fully understand. The more he tried to pull away, the more Victoria tightened her grip. And yet, despite the warning signs, Aarav stayed, convinced that the marriage was his only hope to remain in America. What he didn't know was that his problems were only beginning. As weeks passed, Aarav began to uncover parts of Victoria's life that left him uneasy. One evening, while she was out, he wandered into her private office and saw stacks of documents scattered across the desk. There were papers tied to shell companies and overseas accounts, all with names he didn't recognize. Some of the accounts even had his name listed as an associate. Panic surged through him as he realized Victoria had been involving him in financial schemes without his knowledge. When she returned, Aarav tried to act normal, but inside, fear consumed him. Victoria had enemies, and it was clear now why she was so secretive. She wasn't just a wealthy socialite married to a real estate tycoon. She was running shady operations behind the scenes. There were whispers of fraud and fake charities, and Aarav started to believe them. The fake marriage wasn't just about helping him stay in the country. It was about creating another layer to her network, hiding money through accounts in his name. Every time he thought about walking away, Victoria reminded him of everything she had done for him and everything she could take away. She had leverage, proof of their arrangement and his connection to illegal transactions. Aarav knew that if authorities started digging, he would be the one facing charges, not her. His dream of a bright future in America was slipping away, replaced by the dark reality of being trapped in someone else's dangerous game. Still, Victoria continued to lure him with promises and luxury. She told him they were building a life together, but Aarav no longer believed her words. The charm that once blinded him was gone, replaced by a fear that grew stronger every day. And then, before he could make sense of it all, the first death changed everything. The first sign of real danger came when news of Daniel Lane's death broke. Aarav saw it on the television in the living room. A breaking news alert announcing that the Millionaire real estate mogul had been found dead in his Las Vegas hotel suite. Initial reports suggested an overdose, but the timing felt too perfect to Aarav. Just days earlier, Daniel had called Victoria in a rage. Aarav overheard the conversation, muffled but tense, with Daniel threatening to expose her for something he didn't fully understand. Now, Daniel was gone. Victoria reacted calmly, almost too calmly. She turned off the TV and told Aarav not to worry, calling it a tragic accident. But Aarav's instincts screamed that this wasn't coincidence. He started thinking back to all the strange late-night phone calls, the secretive meetings, the people visiting the house at odd hours. When Victoria left her phone unattended, Aarav couldn't resist checking it. In the deleted messages folder, he found fragments of conversations, plans for a late-night meeting in Las Vegas on the very night Daniel died. The discovery chilled him. Victoria had the money and the connections to make anything happen. If she could get rid of her own husband, what would stop her from silencing him? Aarav considered leaving that night, but fear paralyzed him. He had no money, no legal status, and now his name was tied to fraudulent accounts. Going to the police felt impossible. He would look like an accomplice, not a victim. Victoria acted as if nothing had happened. She even seemed more affectionate than before, as if Daniel's death had freed her from something. But for Aarav, every smile from her now felt like a warning. He realized too late that he was living with someone capable of murder, and soon she would turn her attention to him. After Daniel's death, everything moved faster. Victoria told Aarav they needed to finish the marriage paperwork immediately. She claimed investigators might start looking into her finances and that having a legal relationship with Aarav would protect both of them. Her voice carried urgency, and her eyes were colder than ever. Aarav wanted out. He told her he didn't feel safe and suggested postponing everything, but Victoria wasn't interested in waiting. She reminded him of the documents bearing his name and hinted that if anything went wrong, he would take the fall. The threats became more direct. Victoria warned him that immigration could deport him within weeks if she made a single phone call. She even suggested that people were watching him and that trying to run would be dangerous. Fear gripped Aarav. He started contacting friends discreetly, hoping to find a way to escape or return to India before things escalated. At the same time, he began researching ways to expose her without getting himself implicated. Aarav came up with a risky plan. Record a conversation where Victoria admitted everything. He believed that if he had proof, the authorities would protect him. Quietly, he bought a small recording device and kept it hidden. Every day felt like a game of survival. He pretended to be calm around Victoria, smiling when she spoke about their future, while inside, his thoughts raced. Victoria, however, seemed to sense his growing distance. She watched him closely, questioning his every move, and her temper flared at the slightest sign of defiance. Aarav knew he had little time left. If he didn't act soon, he would either end up in prison or worse. Gathering his courage, he decided the next dinner they shared would be the moment he captured the truth. He didn't realize that night would become his last. On a cold February night in 2021, Aarav walked into the mansion with a small recording device hidden beneath his shirt. His plan was simple: get Victoria to confess to the marriage scam and any involvement in Daniel's death. If he could capture her words, he might finally have leverage to escape. He rehearsed what he would say on the drive over, forcing himself to smile when he entered the lavish dining room where Victoria had prepared an elaborate meal. Everything looked perfect, but beneath the surface, Tension crackled in the air. They sat across from each other, candles flickering between them. Aarav tried to keep his voice steady as he casually steered the conversation toward Daniel. Victoria's answers were careful, almost rehearsed, but Aarav pressed on, hoping to catch something he could use. Minutes passed, and nothing incriminating slipped out. Then Victoria excused herself to the kitchen. Aarav exhaled, his heart pounding as he checked the recorder in his pocket. Everything was working. He believed he was still in control. When Victoria returned, she was holding 2 glasses of wine. She placed one in front of him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Aarav hesitated but didn't want to raise suspicion, so he took a sip. At first, everything seemed normal. Then a strange heaviness settled in his chest. His vision blurred, and his hands began to tremble. Panic surged through him as he realized what was happening. He tried to speak, to stand, but his body refused to move. By the time paramedics arrived, Aarav was unresponsive. Victoria claimed he collapsed suddenly, blaming stress and exhaustion. The official report called it a heart attack, but the autopsy told a different story. Traces of a rare poison were found in his system. Aarav never got the chance to hand over his recording. Aarav's death shocked both his friends in Los Angeles and his family back in India. News channels picked up the story within days. A young Indian student found dead in the Hollywood Hills home of a wealthy socialite. Initial reports labeled it as a tragic heart attack, but when the toxicology report revealed traces of an uncommon poison, the narrative shifted to something far darker. Detectives opened an investigation, but by then, Victoria Lane had vanished. Authorities discovered that she boarded a private jet bound for Mexico just hours after Aarav's death. From there, her trail went cold. Bank accounts linked to her name were emptied, luxury cars were abandoned, and her mansion stood eerily silent, its opulence now a crime scene. Investigators dug deeper into her life and uncovered layers of fraud, offshore accounts, and the fake marriage scheme. Aarav's name appeared in several financial documents, making it clear he had unknowingly been part of a larger operation. His family fought for justice, appealing to both U.S. and Indian authorities, but with Victoria gone, there were few answers. The FBI eventually placed her on its most wanted list, describing her as a master manipulator with access to international resources. Some believed she had fled to Europe, others claimed she was hiding in South America, living under a new identity. The story captured worldwide attention, sparking debates about immigration struggles, power dynamics, and the dangerous lengths some people will go for control. For Aarav, what began as a dream of building a future in America ended in betrayal and death. For Victoria, it became a chilling reminder that wealth and charm can hide the darkest intentions. Years later, her whereabouts remain unknown, and the question still lingers. Was this about love, money, or something far more sinister?